does that drive us closer towards the legacy that we're trying to build and leave? And if the answer is yes, then okay, I know the sacrifice that I'm making, I know why I'm making it, and I know what the ultimate goal is. If the answer is no, then I probably shouldn't be doing that stuff, and I should stay and rededicate that time to family. We just kind of look at that ultimately what the end goal is, the legacy we want to leave, and which decision pulls us closer to meeting that.
Welcome to the Path to Wealth, the show about well-being, fulfillment, and financial freedom. And I'm your host, Hannes Henschel. Hello, everybody. Today we have Larry D. West III from Precision Business Strategies. He's a super finance-savvy business strategist that has a heart for mapping out how to stay in the financial realm without too heavy of a tax liability. Larry, welcome to the Path to Wealth.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, he's located in the greater Dallas area, right north of Dallas. And yeah, we would really like to hear, how did you get where you are today, having your own company? Did you always have that entrepreneurial spirit in your family, or is that something that came along the journey? Kind of, maybe you can give us a little bit of the background that you have.
Yeah, so for me, it started really, really young. I actually started selling candy in school, which was against the rules at the time, but I did it anyway. So basically what happened was I was at the point where to get a job, you had to be, I think, 16 to get your work permit. So I wasn't quite 16 yet, but I wanted money because I wanted things. And, we didn't grow up in the poorest household, but we didn't also grow up in the most well-off or wealthiest household. But my mom, she made sure we had what we needed. But like every kid, especially when you hit those teenage years, I wanted more. So the only way I saw to do that, and this is when dollar stores were really still a thing, and you can get Reese cups, Twix, Snickers bars. You can get those for like 40 cents and 50 cents at the time. Now you can't get them for less than $1.70.
Yeah.
But anyway, I go to the dollar store that was around the corner from the house. I'd load up on Reese cups, on Twix, on Snickers, and I'm paying 50 cents for them. I go to school and sell them for $1. And that started to work because, one, at that time, this was before schools looked like like super awesome facilities. So we didn't have vending machines and things like that.
Yeah.
So if I brought the snacks to school, I was the only choice that they had to buy from. And so I started doing that, just kind of churning it. And at the time, I didn't realize I was making 50% margins, but that's exactly what was happening.
Yeah, great margins.
I go buy
right?
it from the not bad at all, right? So I'd go buy it from the dollar store, load it up in my backpack, sell it at school, and that was really the start of the entrepreneurial side for me. And that went on for a while. I think I did that for maybe a year and a half, and then I got a regular job, my first job, right? And even in that capacity, it was an Ace Hardware store, and I had a really good relationship with the owner, Mike. And Mike kind of took me under his wing and started to teach me different things respected to the business side of how you operate. So, when you first get in there, it's like you're just doing these tasks, you get paid an hourly amount, and, you get a check. But I started to see different things from Mike's side, like even his wife would bring me in and show me how payroll is processed. Mike would show me different ownership decisions that he's making, when to hire, when not to hire, how he's doing our schedule to make sure the hours match up. All these different things that are important when it comes to running a business. And I just loved it. I loved it. That's always just been a part of my nature and who I am. And, where we are with Precision Business Strategies, that time spent is just a culmination of where we are now, because a lot of that is what leads through to what we're currently building.
Yeah. So is it something that you naturally seeked out? You mentioned like you were really into it, or is that something that grew from their mentorship because they were kind of pulling you into those tasks? Like, for example, payroll for many people doesn't sound that excited. Is that something that you had a natural curiosity and drive towards, or how was it nurtured?
Yeah, so that operational side was not innate curiosity at all, right? Those were things that they kind of pulled me in and mentored me on. I was more concerned about how do I own this? And in translation, how do I make money from this?
Yeah.
How do I make the most money possible at that time? That's kind of what I was thinking. But that mentorship kind of set the stage for, all right, there is this ownership piece, there is this entrepreneurial piece, but you got to know how things run from an operational perspective if you want longevity. And
Yeah.
so, like our conversations about payroll were more along the lines of, well, how do you decide what to pay somebody? And how do you set your payroll schedule so that it matches with cash flow? Now, at
Yeah.
16, that's a foreign language. I have
Yeah,
no
that
idea
sounds
what it
far out, right?
truly means. Yeah. And so, I listen, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But then as you get into it in later years, you're like, I've seen this before. I got an understanding of what this is supposed to look like.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times in life, things connect in hindsight. It's where like, those are those pieces of a puzzle that we picked up in some completely other circumstances that initially didn't look
Hmm.
like they're gonna match here, but I'm like, hey, wait, I've seen this pattern. From that role, being 16, how did you progress to being like a professional strategist for like multi-million dollar clients?
Yeah, that's a long stretch there, and how that came about. So when I originally left and went off to school, um, I kind of got involved heavy on the academic side, and my initial goal was to go on the education side of things. So I went and got a bachelor's in English, master's in ed. I was this close to starting my PhD program, and then I decided that education wasn't for me. And the thing that was really tugging at my heartstrings there was there's really no ownership of it, right?
Yeah.
You kind of get involved in this system, especially when we're talking public education, administration. It's heavy, it's political. You got this lockstep chain. You got to do this before you can get to that. And it just wasn't appealing. The creativity wasn't there
It's
for
very
me. The
linear,
flexibility
right?
wasn't there, and there was yeah, and there was nothing that I could like take and say, this is mine, this is legacy that I could pass down. But more on that later because it actually comes full circle.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks before I'm set to graduate, turned in my master, did my thesis and all that stuff. A couple of months before I'm set to start the PhD program, I go to my friends and also my advisor and I say, hey, I'm gonna do this. These next 2 weeks, I'm gonna graduate, but I'm not going into education. I'm immediately changing. And so from there, I went and enrolled in business school, went on to get an MBA, and that kind of started the process on the business side and learning there. But I was quickly humbled because I thought I was going to leave there, land some really good, high paying finance job, straight out of college, making six figures, that whole lifestyle that folks kind of dream of. And from there, I was going to take that money, start my own business, and do all these things.
Yeah.
Well, that ain't happened. In fact, I didn't even come close to that. After I graduated, we moved down to Texas, and we moved to the city called Abilene, Texas, small city in the middle of nowhere in West Texas. Um,
What made you move there?
so my wife wanted to go to Abilene Christian University to do
Yeah.
her master's degree. And to this day, I have no idea how and where she found ACU, but she did, and that's why we moved there.
Okay, I see.
So, I get there, and Abilene's such a small city. It's not the big city like Chicago or New York or anything like that. And so when you think of these high profile kind of jobs that I thought I was going to get, they don't necessarily exist there.
Yeah.
So that's where again, kind of going through this humbling process of figuring out, well, what do I want to do? I got connected with a small RIA financial advising practice out there, and I started to learn the ropes of the financial advising side. But more importantly, though, I took a liking to the tax side of things. So I went on to earn my enrolled agent designation and did some tax strategy, tax consulting, and then launched a tax prep firm. That was my first kind of real foray into the business world because I saw H&R Blocks, Liberty Tax, and all those kinds of folks, and I'm like, well, now that I understand taxation and how it works, I see what they're doing. My strategy was let me undercut them. I see what they're charging. I'm just going to be cheaper and do more, right?
So for the common person, what are they doing? Because I remember the first time, like over a decade ago, the first time I had to process text in the United States, I also walked into an HR blocks. And when I saw that they're just
Mhm.
transferring numbers, I was like, I don't know what you're doing, but next year I'll figure this out by myself. So for other people that feel like that, like you also figured it out from the
Yeah.
business side that they're not doing any rocket science at HR blocks, not to bash them in any way, but
No, no. For the most part, that's not the case. You're right. It's data entry. It's, hey, I'm going to take what's in box one of your W-2 and put it in box one of the screen, and then just transferring that data back and forth. And they basically churn them out, right? And it's all
yeah,
about volume. And so when I first saw that model, I thought to myself, well, if they're doing volume, I know I can do volume. I'm just going to, like I said, do it cheaper
yeah.
and do more, which sounds good at first, but not really the best strategy
It's
in
not
my
very
opinion.
scalable, right?
But yeah, no, because you have to, one, you have to have people,
Yeah,
and then you have to continue to have mass volume. And
yeah.
even what we're seeing in the tax world now, like prices are getting squeezed when it comes to just preparation of a return. And so if I had stayed specifically in that space, like margins would be so much tighter.
I guess at this point you're also
So
competing with a lot of software companies, right? That kind of automate that to such a decrease where the margin are as tight as they get.
yep, yep. So you have the emergence of like TurboTax. This is before H&R put out their self prep software, but all that stuff was coming online around the same
Yeah.
time, and so more folks were just like you mentioned, like I don't know what these folks are doing, but I'll figure out how to do it myself next time.
So how did you move from that pivotal moment where you realized you can't scale it? I guess that was kind of your realization because there's a limit to your personal time or to bringing in more volume. How did you progress from there?
Hmm. Well, I went back to when I first initially started to learn about tax, and the part that I loved about it was the strategy, the strategy around it. So understanding tax law, tax rules, and things like that, but then finding unique ways to navigate that system, but still stay within the letter of the law was
Yeah.
very, very in tune with what I wanted to do. And even that previous firm that I worked at, that's where a lot of the value was as well. It was less around, hey, prepare my return, and more around, listen, if we do these certain things, what does that mean from a tax perspective? And how can we do it different or do it better? So I
Yeah.
took that and really started to build out my career from there and focus more on the strategy and the planning side. So ultimately, that business ended up closing because the volume was just too much and it made life a little bit miserable.
Yeah.
So I wrapped that up, worked for a couple of traditional CPA firms over the next couple of years, and then launched my own consulting firm where the basis was all about strategy and consulting and planning. And so I'd go to clients and say, listen, if you want your tax return prepared, yeah, we can do it, but we're probably not the best fit. If you want to understand how to save taxes right now, this year, before we get to the end of the year, then let's sit down and have a conversation and figure out what strategy we can put in place. And then
Yeah.
we just started to grow from there.
I think that's a piece that many people miss, that taxes can be strategized ahead of the return, and it's not only about putting in the numbers in the right kind of boxes in order to have the best tax return or lowest tax somebody has liability. So do you feel like there are a lot of people in the W2 space that are looking for tax strategies, or is it mainly business owners like you and me that already kind of got to that level of realization that being smart about tax strategies actually helps mitigate the liabilities at the end of the year?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of both. What tends to happen is that folks on the W-2 side, um, especially higher earners, their thing is always, look, I know I make money, but I'm paying way too much in tax. What
Yeah,
can I do? And everyone tells them like, hey, you're a W-2, you can't do anything.
yeah,
There are some unique things that you can do, so I rebuttal against that a little bit. But certainly they don't have all of the opportunities that business owners have. When you look at how the tax code is written, is constructed, what's allowed, what's not allowed, it essentially incentivizes folks who go out there and create opportunities, who create
yeah,
access and opportunities. So when you start a business and you're an employer, for example, sure, you have to pay payroll tax, but that also opens the door for, like we just seen, things with the employee retention tax credit, the work opportunity tax credit, and different things like that. When you start retirement plans, there's some startup credits for that. So there are incentives there. But also, when you're a business owner, it opens the door for additional write-offs, right?
Yeah.
Things that are regular expenses that now have a business application. Those things now become deductible, and it creates a different opportunity for folks to really take advantage of the tax code.
Speaking about deductibles and write-offs, I know many people get upset with business owners that they are able to minimize their tax compared to someone who is maybe just working class W-2 income. Why does the government do that? Because I want people to see that it's actually kind of a partnership with the government that business owners have, and I would like to hear from you why there are these kind of deductibles and incentives to be tax efficient for business owners or investors. Like, what is the government trying to achieve by doing those things, and why they're not giving those breaks to maybe common
Yeah.
W-2 earners?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. A couple of things to recognize there. One, tax revenue basically or taxes are basically revenue for the government, and so everyone pays their fair share, or should pay their fair share, but no one has to pay more than their fair share. And the government looks like this from a perspective of, look, we need to tax our entire citizen base, right, for us to have revenue. However, we know we have to spur development, we have to spur innovation, we have to spur all these things to keep our country, our economy moving forward. And where does that happen? It happens in business, right?
Yeah.
And so if we want to incentivize people to continue to start businesses, to continue to progress and spur innovation and development and move us forward, we have to give them some type of incentive to do so. So when you look at things like real estate, for example, folks in the real estate space are very, very tax advantaged. Well, we need housing, right? We
Yeah.
need development. We need all these things. And so the government creates these different incentives that allow regular citizens to go into these spaces. And when they go in these spaces, they now can have these deductions and write offs for providing access and opportunity to the general public. If everyone had the ability to write things off, our tax base would be virtually non-existent, right? And then where does the government get money to, operate and do all those other things? And so when you really boil it down, they're incentivizing the things that they want to get done.
Yeah.
Again, when you look in the tech space from a development perspective, they have what are called not software development credits. It is called oh geez, I'm drawing a blank. Oh, research, excuse me, research and development credits. So that's for computer scientists, hard scientists, software tech development, and things like that. If they want to continue to spur again innovation in those spaces, they're giving these companies tax credits to incentivize them to constantly produce and do more.
Yeah.
And that's just the way the rules are written.
And I think we all agree that incentivizing innovation is like the bottom line for future wealth for the entire country. I mean, if the more innovation we have and we incentivize, the better of the future of the country will be, because I think we've seen it in the tech space where California and overall the US is taking a lead in the world, and they're actually reaping a lot of the global benefits for that. So for someone who is on a W-2, where do you think they should get started to maybe from a basic tax return into a tax strategy? Like where can they get started? And I think for most, it starts with some level of education before they can even ask the right questions towards someone like you.
Yeah. There is some education there, but I think the most important thing is, and this is a question that most of them will ask anyway: what can I do to lower my tax bill or create as close to tax-free income as possible? And the answer is actually very, very clear. Um, One, you can start a business, right? And that's when you can open the door for, again, earning money and have those deductions and all those other things. So that's a possibility. But the other is looking at things from an investment perspective. Now, real estate becomes a very, very easy example to use. So I'll run with that one for a moment. When you walk into that space, the way the tax code is set up, there's a sneaky little thing called depreciation, and it allows you to be cash flow positive in your real estate. That's actual hard dollars that you have in your account that you can take out and spend. But depreciation basically drops down or wipes out a good portion of your taxable income that comes from real estate. So
Yeah.
you got the money, but you pay very little to no taxes on that money. That's a great place, a great space to be in. And as a W 2 earner, you can walk into that space and do just that. So now there are some rules, losses, limitations, all that other stuff. We don't have to jump into that right now. But the point is, you can earn money and pay little to no taxes on it as a W 2 earner. And that's what essentially what a lot of them are looking to do. So real estate is a great thing to look at. Having a side hustle or a business is another thing to look at, amongst a few others.
Are those tax advantages something that someone could also find in traditional, maybe market investments like the stock market, ETFs, mutual funds, or?
No, so those will operate a little bit different, especially if they have a traditional brokerage account. So the income that they receive is going to be treated as capital gain. So they buy a equity position, they buy a stock or whatever it is, they hold it, then they sell it. They're going to pay a capital gain unless they sell it for a loss. So it's favorable, it's taxed favorably, but it's not the same as real estate, because the difference is with real estate, you continue to earn that rental income every time. First of the month, tenant pays the
Yeah.
rent, hopefully, right? And that continues to come in, and that depreciation continues to offset that income. And depreciation is not true money flowing out the door. And so that's what makes real estate a more advantageous business model to look at.
Yeah. And I mean, right now we're still in the phase of bonus depreciation. So it's very heavily depreciated in year one of a purchase, which is slowly being phased out now, right?
Yep. Yep. So this year, unless something changes, which doesn't seem like there are any plans to make that happen, bonus depreciation will start to phase out. So this is the last year it'll be 100%. Next year it'll revert down to 80, 60, 40, all the way until we get to 20% in 2026.
Yeah. So we got to invest heavily the next couple of years to get our full
Yep.
depreciation and get taxes down to zero.
Yes. Yep.
In your journey, I think initially what I heard is your spark was really to improve your own quality of life, like to have a better life for yourself and have maybe things that you couldn't have in the earlier stage of your life. But I know now you're at a stage in your life where you kind of outgrew that. What is something you currently care for? Because you're going out there now, it's already beyond your own means and your own family. What are you currently contributing to? Or what is some of the maybe charitable work you've been doing lately?
So remember at the beginning, I mentioned we'll come full circle on the education
Yeah,
side. That's where, outside of what we're doing on strategy and business, that's where we spend a lot of our time. We have a school that we started, West Learning Academy, and that school is specifically designed to serve kiddos with different learning impairments. And so we're working with kiddos that are K through 3. And when you look at what happens with that age group, that's one of the most critical learning stages or learning years. But what happens is they're often underserved, especially with respect to public schools, because public schools in most places don't have the resources to
yeah.
accommodate all the children that come to those come there. So we started West Learning Academy to really fill that void, and we're driving home a message in the education space of every child deserves access to quality education. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter the age, doesn't matter the diagnosis, doesn't matter what's happening there. Every child deserves that access. And so we spend a lot of time making sure we play in that space, create opportunities, access and opportunities in that space.
And where did that come from? Why did you move in this particular space when it came in that niche of education? Is that something that's personally very close to you or your wife?
No, so it's nothing that's affected or hit us personally. It's more of a passion.
Yeah.
When we look at the landscape of kiddos that are struggling, and you have kiddos that are struggling in different spaces, and one isn't necessarily better or worse than the other one. It's the
Yeah.
one that we felt personally drawn to and attracted to, and so she is a school psychologist, and so that's a lot of the work that she already does. And of course, I mentioned my background on the education side, and so those two things marry together really well.
Where do you see the future between the charitable work and the work you do in business strategies for yourself? Because I feel like you got a really healthy balance. I know you care very much about the little things in life, like making time for your family. How do you actually bring that into a balanced entrepreneurial life? Because you're still growing your strategy business, but at the same time, I know you try to
Hmm.
make time for the right things in life, like the kids and the family.
Yeah, it all comes down to priority management, right? And we hear a lot about work-life balance and all of those things. It's really hard to balance those two. And so
Yeah.
at certain times, priorities tend to elevate more than the other, right? So, for example, when you look at the tax space, there is a lot of priority around this time of the year because it's tax season, it's tax deadlines, and so that pulls away from family time.
Yeah.
We recognize that. So internally, we try to balance it with less responsibility on my end and more on hers. Now, the opposite side of that, there are very heavy report writing times throughout the year for her. And so
Yeah.
we balance that as well. That's less time in the family for her and more time for me. And then there are pockets that happen throughout the year where it's all, all family. But it's a tough thing to really like truly balance out on a scale. And so you give and you take. Um, just depending on what's happening and what those dynamics are. It's a hard reality to really come to because most folks are chasing that balance. I just don't think it exists. I think one is
I
going
agree.
to
Yeah, I think chasing is
suffer
the
towards it.
right word there, because it's never
Yeah,
in a consistent state of equilibrium. It's always like, okay, in order to do this right now, I have to say no to this. And that, I guess, that's kind of the definition of focus, is ignoring everything else. So if you want to spend
yeah,
quality time with our family, we choose to ignore other things. Or if we choose to dive into business, we choose to ignore other things.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
what's your north star when it comes to this kind of decision making? Like, how do you prioritize in a way that makes you feel 40, 50 years from now, when you sit there and you look back, you don't have any regrets about the choices you made in life?
Yeah, yeah. It really is the ultimate goal, the legacy that we're looking to build and leave behind. So, in times where work takes a bit of a heavier priority, the focus there is the work that I'm doing, the time that I'm taking, that I'm spending away from home, outside of the house, doing this work stuff. Does that drive us closer towards the legacy that we're trying to build and leave?
Yeah.
And if the answer is yes, then okay, I know the sacrifice that I'm making, I know why I'm making it, and I know what the ultimate goal is. If the answer is no, then I probably shouldn't be doing that stuff and I should stay and rededicate that time to family. And then the
Yeah.
opposite. There's some times where work is always going to be second fiddle to family based on what's going on. And does that move us closer to legacy, being a better family, and things like that? And so we just kind of look at that ultimately what the end goal is, the legacy we want to leave, and which decision pulls us closer to meeting that.
What was the ignition in that vision for legacy? Like, where did that come from? Because at least from my upbringing, legacy is nothing that was like natural in my field of vision. When did that kind of start growing in your mind to build a legacy for your family, and what drives you in that?
Yeah, it happened right around the time my firstborn was born. Because before that, it was a quite candidly, it was a money chase, right? Like how
Yeah.
do we build an like legacy at that point was money. How do we build a big bank account? How do we make sure we have savings and all this other stuff? But something about having a kid just changes that perspective. And For me, it was something about having my firstborn also be my son
Yeah.
that changed that perspective as well. And it's like, well, now every decision you make is bigger than you, right? Because now the impact has to carry down to him. And when you think
Yeah.
about your experiences growing up, how do you want that to be different and or better? So that's where the legacy really derives from for me.
Do you feel like that's something that you've seen growing up already, that your parents gave you maybe that North Star, that there was like a clear intent of what they're um, handing forward or to you?
Yeah, I think there are portions of that came from my mom and our upbringing on that side because a lot of the decisions that she made were not necessarily in the best interest for her, but in the best
Yeah.
interest of us as her
Yeah.
kids. Um, and so seeing the sacrifices that she made definitely set a bit of a tone and understanding of, look, this what you're doing in life is bigger than just you. So yes, definitely. A lot of that came from my mom.
Do you feel like the larger the scope of your life gets, the less it's about you?
Yes.
Because at
that
first
that
it was
that
about,
doesn't even need any additional follow up. That's just a solid yes across the board.
yeah, because I feel like at first it's kind of about our wishes and dreams, and the larger we grow, the level of impact, it's actually it's getting less and less about us and a lot more about the at first the immediate family and the people we care for, and then the larger mission that drives us. So building a legacy, I think, also means becoming a role model in many ways. And I think you're already a role model within your community to some degree. But where do you think the importance of role models has been in your life? I mean, you did mention you have a mentor that helped you kind of getting into the nitty gritty of what it takes to, from an operational standpoint, to run a business. But did you find different kind of role models in your life that maybe gave you the nudge in the right kind of direction?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Perhaps outside of my mother, um, my biggest role model were two teachers in particular that had a very profound impact in changing the trajectory of my life. So that's Thomas Wild and Paul Moga. And I met these two gentlemen in high school, and they were co-teachers in a what we called it a block class, but it was basically a cultural studies class, African American studies,
Yeah.
um, and it the class itself meant so much in teaching us historically who we were, where we come from, notable figures that from the past that we otherwise may not have known about, and driving home a perspective of we can control our own narrative and who we are and who we become. We don't
Yeah.
have to basically subscribe to what society puts out there. But those two gentlemen were so influential in my life. They literally kind of uh, saved me from a direction that I was headed in.
Yeah. So where do you think does that shift? It's almost like a shift in mindset, right? It's like there is this glass ceiling where society tells us, okay, this is what you kind of people might have done in the past, and that's something that we start to identifying with. And where did you shatter that for yourself? Was that in that class? Is that something that marinated in your head where you were like, okay, I can take this to any extent that I want to?
Yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt, it happened in that class.
Yeah.
In those last 2 years of high school, the junior and senior year, or actually, no, sorry, sophomore year is when I first met them. So those last 3 years definitely set that tone of there's no limit on how far you can go, on how far you can
Yeah.
push it, on how successful you can be. So think and dream bigger than where you currently are. So yes, yeah.
Yeah, I very much agree that I feel like I personally, being from Europe, being from Germany, I had such a crust around what I could be. And then
Mhm.
immigrating to the United States was very refreshing because suddenly all of the noise of what people told you you could be or what could be around you was gone. And I would say that the US is very fertile ground for people that look for the next level in any way. It's like entrepreneurs. It's just an environment where those things are sparked naturally, I find. For someone that broke through that glass ceiling, how do you think people that are currently still struggling with that, where can they get started? Is it books, is it podcasts, or is it maybe, how do they find the right kind of guidance? Like you had those particular figures in your life, but where can they find those figures for themselves?
Yeah, I think access to those kinds of folks is open more than it ever has been
Yeah.
before. So you can find quite a few things online, whether that's on social apps or just a general search. And obviously take that with a grain of salt because the internet is just filled with things and
Yeah.
stuff. But I do think whatever folks are searching for, whether it's a connection to somebody who's in a space that they're in, or seeing people that look like them just to have the motivation to understand that they can accomplish certain things, the access to see that stuff is abundant. I mean,
Yeah.
again, if you're intentional about your social media usage, you'll find it there, or just about the online search, it'll be there. But also, there are people that are probably in folks' backyard right now that they just don't realize that they're there. And so, look at whatever it is you want to do, whoever you want to be, however you want to live your lifestyle. Look in your backyard around people that are in your community, in your neighborhood, and have conversations. There's nothing wrong with a good old fashioned pleasure to meet you. I'd love to learn from you kind of a
Yeah.
conversation. I think we've lost that a little bit, but it's definitely something that could help um, rein folks in and bring perspective.
With that old school line of introduction, did you have some people that you just chatted up like that and it really sprouted into maybe just a conversation or a longer term relationship that gave you more of an insight in what it takes to grow to their level?
Yep, absolutely. Some of the folks that I've had the longest relationships right now were not folks that we would have been in obvious places to meet. So right,
Yeah.
a lot of them aren't from school relationships or work relationships or things like that. They're from meeting people at in different spaces. One I met in an airport, some I've met at conferences and things like that. And you just spark up a simple conversation. You find synergy there. You stay connected, and it starts to build out a fruitful relationship from there.
How did that airport go? Like when I see myself at the airport, I mean, I don't, did you intentionally start speaking to someone there, or was it just by coincidence you were in a line or?
No, they actually started speaking to me, and I was a bit annoyed at first because I'm head down trying to get some work done, and they're
Yeah.
asking me questions, and so I answered a couple of the questions they asked, and I'm trying to remember what they were. But anyway,
Tech
he asked me like
strategy?
two questions.
Was it right deep dive in tech strategy talk?
No, no, this was like something about the airport and where something was, and in my mind, I'm like, if you
Like,
just look at the signs, you'll figure it out. But anyway, after he asked those two questions, I think he realized that I was like, guy, I'm trying to get some work done here, and he asked me what I did. And that was kind of the gateway. So I shared, what I do in terms of tax planning, tax strategy, and this guy is a skydiving instructor. And
yeah.
little did I didn't know he was an instructor, but I had always wanted to go skydiving. And so there was an immediate synergy there. Now
Yeah.
I'm like, close the laptop. All right, let's sit down and talk.
Did you go skydiving since then?
Yes, not with him yet, but yes, I have.
Yeah. How did that feel? Because yeah, go ahead. I want to hear from you first.
It is the scariest, most exhilarating, fearful, yet funnest, and funnest isn't even a word, thing ever.
Yeah, I think I would very much agree. I remember that odd feel when you just go from having the gravity in the airplane into falling towards Earth.
That fall, yeah,
Yeah.
it is different, but it's like, again, it's scary, but you feel free, and it's exciting, but you're super scared. And I'm not an expert by any means, so I don't go by myself. I still have
Yeah.
a guide there, so I don't have to have so much control over what happens, but I'm putting a lot of faith in this person to do what they're supposed to do. So
Yeah, I felt the same way. And then I felt like the fall itself was, it was almost like I'm meant to fall like that. It just felt so good. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Probably I'm hijacked by all kinds of adrenalines and stuff. But the fall itself felt just like this is what I'm supposed to do. Just keep falling. So, well, what did it take you to overcome that fear of jumping out of an airplane? Or was there no fear? Was it more of an excitement in the first place?
It was more excitement. Of course, there's some fear and anxiety leading up to it because it's a whole bunch of what ifs.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things that's like, hey, just do it. That's the only thing that was in my mind is like, all right, got flutters, definitely nervous, but let's just go for it.
And when it comes to owning your own business or starting your own entrepreneurial journey, would you say there is equal amounts of what ifs, and what does it take to break through that wall? Because I think it's more of a mindset than a how to get a business off the ground.
Yeah, I agree with that. From that perspective, I look at it again much in the same way of look, we know what the alternative is. If we don't do this business, we know exactly what we have to do. We have to go get a job. We have to work for
Yeah.
someone. We have to do all these things, and there's nothing wrong with that. That fits a lifestyle for some people. It
Yeah.
doesn't for others. And the reality is, when you start a business, you think everything is going to go like this because you've got this master plan. Everybody's going to love your product, your service. You're just going to put a couple of things on social media. You'll blow up. You'll go viral. You'll sell a lot of stuff. Um, but that's not that's not how it happens. It is a road that is littered, that is peppered with adversity. You could have the best day Monday, but then you come in Tuesday and things fall apart, and you have no one to look to but yourself to figure out
Yeah.
how to pull it together. And so I think it ultimately makes you stronger as an individual, but you do have to have a very strong mindset of your first instinct or reaction is not to give up. It's to always find a solution,
Yeah.
even when things are bad. Because the reality is, again, nobody to fall back on and rely on but yourself. So
Yeah.
those are my thoughts.
So it takes a certain level of gut health and mindset to do it, because ultimately you take on 100% of responsibility, right?
Yep, absolutely. And in that same vein, I think the mindset evolves over time as well. Because when you first start, typically, and unless you've got support capital and all that other stuff, you start solo, or maybe you and a partner,
Yeah.
and the mindset is, well, I have to do everything. That then starts to evolve into less around how do I do it and more around how do I find somebody that will do it. And so that's when you start to hire, bring people on your team, or at least outsource a lot of those things.
Did that come natural to you to find the right kind of team to maybe not only cover your blind spots, but also kind of leverage their time and scale with them?
No, no. I was abominably terrible at it. And so the first couple of folks that I outsourced to, what was interesting was I hired them, I paid them, but I did the work. And why did I do the
Yeah.
work? Because I felt like for the delivery that I wanted, it wouldn't be done right unless I did it. So
Yeah.
I'm paying money for people to do nothing, and I'm still stressed out. Is basically what happened. And then I move into a space where okay, now I'm going to trust somebody to actually do it, and they fail miserably. So now I'm guarded. I'm like, okay, now that's why I did it this way in the first place. I can't find people
Yeah.
to do good work. So it was terrible. And the reality was, and still is true, is that if things are operating and flowing a certain way, whether unintentional or intentional, it's because you designed it that way. So if you want to change that design, change that perspective, change what's happening, you have to change how you approach it. So my perspective on the hiring side then became, all right, what is the thing that's taken up so much time that I am not the best at? It's still necessary, but I'm just not the best at doing it. For us in our practice, that was the books. I am
Yeah.
phenomenal at financial analysis. I am phenomenal at tax planning and tax strategy. I know how to do accounting and bookkeeping. I'm not the best at actually doing the accounting and
Yeah.
bookkeeping. So now I got to bring somebody in who can do that at a very high level so I can continue to do the things that I'm phenomenal at. And then that is just a continue to grow. So my first hire, my first right hire, I'll say, was someone to take on that piece. alleviated so much time. Then the next was someone to help keep our projects organized and structured. I was the person who had everything up here, and I don't forget anything, allegedly, right? But then things started to fall by the wayside. So now,
Yeah.
because I'm not the best at the project management, I've got somebody in place who oversees all of our client services and projects that make sure things get done, and then
Yeah.
continue to elevate that, so on.
So for you, it was really honing in on your skills, and then find complementary people that cover that based on their own strengths. Yeah, I very much agree with that approach. I think that there is a sentiment now when I look at back in my career that people want you to also work on your weaknesses, and obviously there's something to that where you kind of even out the bump in the road maybe a bit. But I think there's a lot more for just doubling down or quadrupling down on our strengths, and use that as the gifts we have, and then there will be other people who cover our blind spots with their own talents and gifts.
Yep.
Yeah. So where would you like to grow your company towards from here? You've built your team, you've freed up more time. Is there a next level that you're going for at this stage?
Absolutely. I have my eyes set on moving PBS into the same echelon and realm as um, some of the global management consulting firms. When you think of
Oh wow.
um, when you think of Bain, when you think of Boston Consulting Group, when you think of PwC, KPMG, I think we can be there. I think we're going to have a very unique target and market that we serve, but I think we will be mentioned in the names of upper echelon management consulting firms similar to theirs for the work that we're going to do in the real estate space, in the education space, and in the retail space.
Yeah. What is that particular niche that you just said you're gonna have while being mentioned with those legacy players? Who are you serving?
Yep. So specifically, when we look at the real estate side, so that's going to be folks that are in the real estate space, mainly private equity syndication funds, are going to be a primary target and focus, but also education. As I mentioned before, we want to get into the consulting space over there and start to not necessarily go into schools and tell them how to do things.
Yeah.
That's not our goal or our purpose, but we understand what we've done at West Learning. We've understand, the art and the science behind teaching, and so we want to take that process and roll that out to other organizations that are looking to disrupt the education space, because I think it's right for it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna do a lot of cool things on the instructional design side in education. Our consulting team will start to pave the road in that way. And then on the retail side, because retail is changing rapidly, whether that's brick and mortar or online stores, we have some phenomenal retail consultants that are going to rock that side of the industry as well. Where some of those bigger groups are focused on the larger multinational firms, I think there's a unique opportunity to serve that middle market, and so we're going to
Yeah.
go after it.
Well, that sounds very exciting. I'm glad you have such a big vision. Larry, it was a pleasure having you and hearing your story, hearing your thoughts on entrepreneurship and mindset and what it takes to, not only close the gap for yourself, but take other people with you on your journey. So thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us at The Path to Wealth. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Check out our upcoming guests and be sure to share it with all your friends and family that want to take their life to the next level of wealth.